Alright, so we're going to do a pop-up live and we'll see what happens, but I'm probably going to download this video and put it out there just to go over some sharpening, so, and talk about some stones. Not so much sharpening, but more about stones. So this is what I'm using. This is by a YouTuber turned knife sharpener, well, knife sharpener turned YouTuber turned good stuff, so I wanted to check that out. But it's got an 800 grit, which is the one we're currently going to use, and then it's got a 3000 grit, which is this guy. So to get that going, one of the things I like to do is just make sure that it's nice and wet. After that, we're going to go through sharpening. I'm going to use a knife I haven't sharpened yet. It's kind of an oddity for me. Most of my stuff is already sharpened, gets sharpened every week. But this one was a newer one. It is a Gerber mini butcher knife, and the problem with it is it has multiple different layers. So it's got a flat spot, it's got the concave spot, which you think would be the blade, and then it's got the actual tipping of the blade. So where most knives you go up 15 degrees, if you go up 15 degrees on this one, you're going to be running it right across there, and it's not going to do anything for you. So you actually have to go up a little further. The other thing I like to do is, on smaller blades, I like to pick the stone up, which probably is not conducive for a lot of people. I'm just a big guy, so it gets pretty easy for me to pick up heavier objects, long story short. But so I just pick it up, I always turn it over, I always want to make sure everything's nice and flat, and I kind of just put it on an angle. You want to miss your fingers and make sure those are not over the top of the stone, for obvious reasons. As we're back dragging, if you're doing a good job, you'll dice the tips of those off, and that's not good. So I always pick a direction, and I always look at wherever I'm going to start. I'm going to go up and back, it's going to go one. So I really, depending on how bad the knife is, and this knife's not really bad, but you kind of change out, and I'm not going to run it over a brick or anything else to make it really dull, to show you how to do the whole knife process. That gets kind of tedious in my brain. I just like making sure sharp knives stay knife, and duller knives have the time. So, and sorry if I get a little quiet while I'm doing this. I just kind of focusing on what I'm trying to do versus talking. But so you set the knife on there, you want to pick it up at a slant, and you just want to drag it across. And this knife has kind of a rolling edge, as you can see. So what I'm doing is I'm rolling it across just to make sure that the whole blade length is touching on every time. So it's about 10, and then go back the other way. I like to pull first to roll the burr over. That's what we're trying to develop on the end here, basically, is a burr. And then come back the same way. And maybe you like doing this, maybe you hate doing it, but it's kind of a necessity for knives as you're going to use them, especially for leather work. Most of the knives I sharpen are for leather work or kitchen purposes, and I went 4 there and I went 4 there, kind of thinking through it. So I try to just change it out to whatever the consistency and feel is going to be, and then I just change it with whatever I need, and eventually you'll get good enough feeling for the burr, feeling for things turning over, that you'll know, okay, we've got a good edge on this thing. And once we wipe it down, what you don't want is to bend the knife in any way so you start scraping up the outside of the blade. Eventually, or if you're new to it, of course, you will do that. Some of my knives have that. Some days you make oopsies. That happens. That's okay. You can fix that with polishing it. Obviously on a knife like this, the edge, you can see it shining in the light, super polished. The blade part right through here, not so super polished. You can polish this part as shiny as the tip if you spend enough time with it. It's just not something I want to do, and not something the knife's designed to do, so I don't want to do things like get rid of the logo. And this isn't some crazy knife either. It was like $30, and I use it in the kitchen all the time just because it's really nice on a pinch method, and it's really nice to drag across the board. And you can kind of feel it too. When you go to drag this thing, it's gonna feel a consistency you want. And it'll also, I'm just cutting a piece of leather, but it'll also give you where the knife blade is at. And just going through that, it's not quite as sharp as I'd like it. It started at a little bit duller state. So we'll go back through. Do the same thing a few times just to make sure we're hitting the edges right. And you can see it's kind of turning through. Or the other thing you can do is you can split the knife right there in half and do both sides however you want. So you can start just doing half, and then you can move your hand and do the other half too. So if you're dragging along, you're gonna feel that drag start to pick up and leave as you get that thing sharper and sharper. Like right there, I can just feel it gone. Okay, so now you're gonna flip it over to the other side. And I just wanna make sure roll that over real quick. And when it's flipped over, we're gonna get right back in the game. And you can see I'm doing big strokes. The other thing you can do is, instead of that motion, and that is basically just, it's basically creating a cutting side to side motion, if you would, up and down. You can also put it on an angle, which works out fine, and do this. This is actually, at that kind of angling, it's actually a little bit more aggressive, and it will cut more down out of the material. So if you start cutting through the material, start having other problems, you're gonna find out that it's gonna sharpen your knife a little bit faster. So you're gonna have to flip it over a few more times. So right there, we're at 6. You're gonna flip it over, drag it backwards, flip it over, come back to you, and we're at the same 6. So that's keeping it consistent. And again, what I'm thinking about is to the top, back 1, to the top, back 2. So that way you can keep a really, really, really consistent slide back and forth. You can make sure that everything is feeling and looking the way you want it to, and you can see the buildup, obviously, that's gonna occur on these different stones as we go through it. So at this point, we should have we took an OK knife into and you can feel it on the edge on this one, and it just cuts beautiful little pieces. So when you're trying to trim a piece of leather back and you're going back through it, obviously you want to be cognizant of where your thumb is, but you can get the edges really nice and easy, and you can see it picking up between the different blades. So when you're looking at that, that is literally cutting off an edge, which is wonderful for justifying wallets. You know, when you're looking at stuff like this and you're wanting to justify the wallet edges or anything else, it's really, really good for that. And we'll talk about that a little bit. But I think we got it at a nice sharp point for right now. So one of the things we're gonna wind up doing is we're gonna wind up just cleaning off the stone. And you'd think with all the material and stuff, it builds up and acts crazy, but it doesn't. It actually cleans off really nicely, even after all that work. And then the next part we're gonna want is to polish it. So different stones, different application. This is a sharpening one. So for round knives, for kitchen knives, there's kind of a different approach. Kitchen knife, I'm gonna wanna go the long ways and run the blade as much surface area as I can possibly get on the stone to make sure that everything is set up and consistent across the run. Smaller blades, like this guy, like I said, I just want to make sure it's coming back and forth and I got a really good hand feel. And you can feel the blade kind of pick up and move, which is good. So there goes that guy. We'll clean this off a little bit and we'll flip over. So this is a 3000 grit. Let's see if I can get that a little closer. So it's a 3000 grit. And this is polishing stone. So this goes, if you're thinking like skiving knife or anything else, this goes from really one point of cutting and understanding to skiving. So you'll be able to take this thing and just skive off pieces when we're done. And I'll kind of show you that too. So take this, once again, just make sure it's nice and flat. I like to make sure that there's more water, and I mix this thing with a touch of Dawn. Just gives it a little bit more continuity back and forth. But take that, we're gonna polish that stone with the knife. Polish the knife with the stone, wherever my brain is tonight. It's some magical place. And you don't want to do the same method over and over. So I did that just to kind of get a consistent piece. But from here, I'm just gonna run it down both sides in a really nice consistent arc. And you're gonna see it create a circle or a crest in the knife. Sharpening stone, because that's where I'm just dragging out from edge to edge. That's back to that rocking motion I was talking about. So hit the tip, come back, hit the heel, come back, hit the tip, same thing. So heel the tip every time. That way you get a really nice polish off this. Okay. Get done with that. You're still making sure the same things. If you look at this knife blade, we polished the edge. You can see the edge polished, but the middle is not polished at all, which is perfect. That's exactly what you want. You want to make sure it's a really nice consistency, and more importantly, want to make sure it's easier to cut the material. Yeah, that's crazy. So the last thing we're going to do and get this thing done, this is a strop. This one's made of a harness on one side and the backing of it on the other, and I like it because it's nice and simple. Makes it nice and easy. So what you do is you just take your knife backwards against whatever you want. It's just to remove the burr and do that last little bit. What you don't want on all that is to overstrop it, because if you push too hard, it'll wind up creating problems. So just push down, just give it a few runs. And you see people like, that's fine. It's kind of ridiculous in my brain. And I don't want to make a oopsie and cut my finger off, because I just sharpened this thing to no end. So what you're gonna have out of all this when you go down to cut is you're gonna have all your access material, and then you can see right there in the corner, you're gonna have this awesome skived piece, and you can make that pretty much as thin as you want. And of course, if you angle the blade, you can get even more cuts or whatever else you want to kind of trim up your piece. So we're gonna go on all sides of this piece just really fast. Okay, and then let's just skive out the side. Sorry, my piece keeps getting smaller and smaller. There you go. And that is a consistently really clean. You can see where it gets super thin right there. And that's off a $30 knife. There's nothing magical about this. You can go to Academy Sports and buy one of these. Nice and simple. So the knife's nothing magically made. It's a good knife. I mean, it's by a good company. I have plenty of their stuff and I like that. But it's not a knife that you can't, is some custom job. I mean, it's a $30 butcher knife. So that in mind, there you go. And you get a really nice consistent, like I said, you get really nice consistent skives, and it works really well. So one of the things I would definitely suggest, and I keep seeing more and more leather workers ask these questions, or they populate in forums, or somebody spending $1 million on X-Acto knives. That's kind of crazy in my mind, especially because we're all in a fight with each other to deliver the best product as cheap as we can, or, you know, depending upon the customization, of course, you know, whatever we can do. And I try to keep mine in mind when I'm selling, you know, wallets. Bags are a little different. Bags are, oh my God, I hate selling bags, but they get a little crazier. But wallets, things like that, you know, obviously we want to create a good product, but we don't want to create something that, you know, as much as I like and would love to sell this for $400, I'm just not that good, and people don't like me that much yet. So maybe one day, but not today. So, and you can make all kinds of things with these. So for the knives, this is a bifold I like to make. You see these all the time. This is a card holder. It's just for 4 cards, just nice and simple. And then of course, you know, you get the more customized things like a zippered wallet, or, you know, whatever else. So that's the reason why you want to have knife sharpening skills. I don't do it a boatload. I just kind of strop and make sure it's sharper as things go on, and make sure that things make sense. Okay. So that's kind of the tutorial piece as to why you want to spend some time with a good stone and try to work on some skills so you can, of course, pursue and move the craft forward. You can do it with these. I started with these. This is a $30 Smith's diamond blade. Works awesome. You drop your knife accidentally on it and drag it across, it's going to rip holes in it. So you got to be really, really careful with this piece. And this is an Arkansas stone, also by Smith's. This combo right here will cost you $50, and it'll sharpen every leather component you have perfectly. The only reason I got away from it, this is 2 inches wide, and I do a lot of big kitchen blades, things like that. Works well for a pocket knife or smaller trim knives or a round knife. It doesn't have the grit consistency for a round knife in my mind, or a skiving knife that you'd want to end with. But for general purpose, most people would be plenty happy with these. So you get good with these. I spent years now just using these two, and I still use them, and I still like them. But I have just since picked up the, and it's RYKY Tran. I picked up RYKY Tran, his 2 800 and 3000 grit stones. And talk about those a little bit. I've sharpened a lot of knives on these, and this thing looks great. It's obviously got little coloration tones, but they're beautiful. I like them a lot. I obviously sharpen on the other side of his name. It's just a me thing, so I don't remove this part of the inking. I love branding marks, things like that. I have other leather companies that I bought stuff from, like Low Tide Leather or Forest and Hide. You know, cool marks and cool makers marks, I think, are one of the more beautiful things in the world. And it's kind of fun. My son's handing me something. Hang on, sorry. So speaking of makers marks, you know, I like the maker mark, you know, as more of a consistent, in your face, front and center thing. I don't like them huge, obviously. I don't, you know, this is pretty extreme. I just like bowls. It's kind of cool. But I like that. So, you know, anything you're going to put that has a marking on it, like this guy's a good example. It's got my marking on it right there. I just want to, you know, it's not the, hey, you know, but it's just cool. It's clean. I love the sword. And hopefully it means something for everybody when they put their maker's mark to something. That's really what the design and intent is, and it also helps you authenticate you did it. Plus, it also helps authenticate you as your product. And if you and your product suck, and you put that to a good enough maker's mark, and enough people realize your product sucks, it's probably going to suck. And that doesn't lead to great days. But this is a product that does not suck. It's made not by him, but it's made by other companies. This is a Nagawa base form. so it works really well for what I'm trying to do. But holistically, as far as leather, as far as sharpening knives, as far as making sure that knife's consistent, sharp, fun, and going to do what it needs to do, because there's nothing scarier than a dull knife. It's how people really get hurt, especially in leather working. I've seen some terrible stuff. I've been asked some questions to try to help through stuff, and it's just interesting. So that's pretty much basically it. We can sharpen a million knives if we want, but we're not going to do that tonight. We're going to just make sure that he knows he did a great job, a good product. I would definitely endorse the product, endorse you going to buy the product if you want to get into sharpening. I spent a lot of time and money on things that didn't work really, really well. So if you want to have one of something, I would definitely suggest going to pick you up a set of these. They're beautiful. They'll probably last forever. If you're scared and you want to go the cheap route, these work great, because somebody's scared and went the cheap route because they don't want to invest a lot of money into things. And unfortunately, at some point, this one I'll probably use forever because I actually like the way it sharpens. But our Arkansas stone here at some point will probably go to the woodshed, just because that 3000 grit works a lot better for polishing. So, and you could use it as a step. Go from the 800. These are usually about 1200, so you could use it as a stepping stone if you wanted to. It doesn't have, like I said, it's not quite wide enough to make sufficient strokes on certain knives, in my opinion. 2 reasons: I'm not good enough and not going to spend the time, and 2, it just feels better, and I like doing things that make sense and are going to make sure that long term I'm appreciating, I'm enjoying my hobby, and even on the things that don't actually accelerate the hobby, but make sure that it creates a nice delicate balance and understanding in my work, so I can pick up a knife and take it and cut off the edge, and you literally only get the piece of the edge. So when you're trying to round something and you can go back and forth on it, and there you go, you get a pretty awesome rounding cut. And that took 2 seconds. It was nice and easy, and hopefully it makes sense. So long story short, the RYKY Tram stones, like I said, are awesome. I really liked it. They've really created an awesome sharpening experience, and I hope he gets to sell a boatload of them. I hope everyone goes and buys some, especially if you're in leathercraft, and I hope you enjoy it. Have a good day.